Alright, so if you've clicked on this video, you've probably heard about this new Russian sniper rifle that the Russians are developing. Before we get into the video, though, I need to state this. I'm going to try to prevent my comment section from being spammed. I know it won't work, but I got to try. So there is something called a sniper's rifle. That's where a trained, legitimate sniper is holding a rifle, and that is his rifle. And then there is a sniper rifle. Now, I know they're spelt really similar, and people get them confused, and they don't understand the English language. So if that's you, I apologize. But yes, I know they're spelt similar, but they are two different things. A sniper rifle is a rifle built with the intent to snipe with it. A sniper's rifle is a rifle a sniper is holding. So please, don't be stupid in the comment section just because you don't understand the English language. They are spelled differently. It's similar, I know that, and it can get confusing, but they are spelled differently. Alright, so if you've clicked on this video, you've probably heard about the new sniper rifle that the Russians are developing. What's the deal with it? So the claims are that it can shoot 7 kilometers. That's absurd. If you're an American, that translates to 4.35 miles. It's called the DXL-5. It's supposed to have a muzzle velocity of 4,921 feet per second. This rifle is supposed to cost $25,000. So how much of this is Russian propaganda and how much of it is real? Now, I should say, I'm not a sniper. I've never taken sniper classes, but I'm a realist, and I look at what is real and what's just make-believe. So let's take a look at this alleged new super sniper rifle and what is real and what is just simply not possible. Alright, so first things first. They've been using the SVD since 1963. Now that, in my mind, doesn't qualify as a sniper rifle. Now yes, again, if a sniper's holding it, it's a sniper's rifle, but it just doesn't fit the characteristics. It doesn't have enough accuracy, it's semi-auto. I would call that more of like a designated marksman's rifle. And that's what they've been using. They recently upgraded to SVD-M in 2020 to help eliminate some of those problems, get the accuracy up, but still, like semi-automatic as a sniper rifle is useless. Because the whole idea of a sniper rifle is shoot from an extended distance. You miss once, even if you have a silencer, like, still you, kabam! A projectile just lands there, everybody scatters. They go down. Now, I know there's exceptions, always, but generally, when there's moving targets at extended distances, you're just not going to hit it. Now, I understand your uncle hit a jackrabbit at 600 yards on a full-on sprint, but that's the exception. That's not the rule. The rule is, once the targets start moving and when they lay down and reduce your target size from this to just the top of the head, you're not going to hit it anymore. So there's no purpose whatsoever to have a semi-automatic rifle because your first shot is the only one that's going to count. So, in my mind, that's not a sniper rifle. It's just not configured properly for that particular job. Plus, it shoots old rimmed ammo at terrible MOA. Now, I understand AK Operator Union tuned his and got it down to like 1 MOA or something like that. But you just don't have those options in the military, or not that I know of. From what I understand, you get issued ammunition, you get issued a rifle, and that's what you get. You don't get to cherry-pick brass or reload your own ammo. You get your issued ammo, end of story. Now, it might be different. I've never served in the Russian military, so I don't know how they do things over there. But that's generally, from what I understand, how things work. Rifles issued, ammunition's issued. That's it. There's no going past that. Alright, so why, let's start with the range. Why is 4.35 miles just not realistic for a sniper shot? Now again, there's always exceptions. If you're on top of the Sears Tower and luck is with you and you just so happen to get things right, it's more of a luck shot. You just took a pop shot and you happen to hit. It's not like I intentionally hit that target. Yeah, you were aiming at it, but it's not something you could, it's not repeatable, if that makes any sense. Or 7 kilometers. So what are some of the things that prevent you from making such of a shot? Number one, the horizon line. You have to be extremely high up to be able to see that far. most scenarios, there's trees and buildings and other shit that will prevent you from ever having that far of a line of sight. Number 2, MOA on the scope. So for example, this scope right here, the turret allows for 75 MOA. Because I'm running the wrong base, I can only get 63 MOA out of it. But even if I could get the full 75 MOA, plus I use the grid inside of here, which would allow me an extra 10 MOA, because when you're zoomed in, you can't see the whole grid, you can only see a small section of it. 85 MOA. And this scope gives you a lot of MOA. So it is just not possible to have that much MOA on a scope to shoot that far, unless you run some sort of elevated base where the scope is aimed out like this of your rifle bore line, and your scope is aimed something like this with an elevated base. Then you could get out to that distance, but it eliminates your ability to shoot targets closer. Let's pretend like I put a base on there so I could shoot 4.35 miles. I would only be able to shoot 100 MOA inside of that. And because 4.35 miles is so incredibly far, and a bullet literally drops at this speed. Now, when I was young, I thought that a bullet like flew up and came down on an arc. No, it doesn't. It falls the second it starts coming out of the barrel. Literally at this speed. So because of how far away you are and the low velocity you're going to have, you're going to only be able to dial back to maybe like 4.3 miles. So anything inside of 4.3 miles, you're simply not even able to shoot. If you were to aim at a target, like say 700 yards away, you actually put your scope on there, you're going to shoot so incredibly high over the target, you might shoot a plane out of the sky. So the MOA on your scope is a really big deal, especially shooting at that range. Because if you set your MOA so you can shoot that far, you're not going to be able to shoot anything inside of it, really. Because the difference between like 4.35 miles and like 4.3 miles is probably like 100 MOA difference. So you're going to have all your adjustment, your target will have to be a minimum of like 4 miles away for you to even attempt a shot at it using your scope. Now, I understand there are bases that adjust, but remember, this isn't some sort of precision extreme long-range match. If you put a big-ass base on there or some sort of adjustable base, and the soldier, because these are soldiers, these aren't people coming in a foam-padded case, very lightly picking up their rifle and putting it on a bench. No, it's slung on their shoulder, and they're humping it through terrain. They bump it on something or drop it, because that base is so long and it applies so much leverage to the actual receiver. You can bend things, you can break the scope. It makes the overall profile of the rifle, because to put some kind of base on there to shoot that far, my scope is probably going to be sitting up this high and tilted down at an angle like this. So the first limiter to why this is propaganda is MOA on the scope. The second one, obviously, horizon line. Oh, man. And then scope dope. So doping that shot, because environmentals would change so frequently and so crazy, knowing the dope for that shot would be incredibly hard. Because let's say, alright, I'm shooting at that range, I shoot once and it's a little bit low. Was that me? Or did my heart beat at that time? Now, I understand a good shooter can help eliminate these variables, but they still exist. And a very, extremely tiny variable at this range would be a ginormous difference downrange. So let's pretend like this rifle is sitting in a machine that shoots it, so there's absolutely no human variables. I could pull the trigger twice, almost consecutively, and my shots are going to go in two very different locations. So putting up a dope card for that type of range, you got to have a luck factor. There's no guarantee. Like, we're going to pretend like it's a 0 MOA rifle. The bullet comes out the exact same way every single time. There's no variance in MOA. You do that, and you pull the trigger twice, you're going to have two different shots, because the environmentals are going to change. And that's another thing that's a limiting factor too, is the MOA of the rifle. Because there's no such thing as a 0 MOA, I mean, we can get pretty good. But a 0 MOA rifle, on a rifle that's actually get practiced on all the time, it's likely to have a less than ideal bore structure because it's a military rifle. We're going to say like they just knock it right out of the park and they build a half MOA rifle. What that means is at 100 yards, you can expect your shots to be inside of a half of an inch. At 1,000 yards, inside of 5 inches. Inside of 2,000 yards, inside of 10 inches. So at 2,000 yards, I'm to the outside of a human target. I have, what, an inch on each side to spare. That's at 2,000 yards. You don't understand how incredibly far 4.35 miles is in yards? How many yards is 4.35 miles?
The answer is 7,656 yards.
7,656 yards. So, 7,656 divided by 2.
It's 828.
828 inches on a half MOA rifle. 828. I'm not even taking up, oh my god. Oh no, it'd be cut in half, so, no, 828 inches. That's what you would be looking at for the possible area for your projectile to land in at that type of range on a half MOA rifle. That's crazy. Like, out of 800 and some inches, I only take up 12 inches. I have a 1 in 8 chance on a half MOA rifle that can hit that far to hit the target. So out of 8 shots, I'm likely to hit once. That is not acceptable odds. Alright, then we got the time of flight. What the time of flight is how long does it take the bullet from leaving the bore to arriving at the target? Why does that matter? Well, Jesus Christ. Like, the time of flight, so I pull the trigger and the guy is standing right here. At that type of range, even with 4,921 feet per second at the muzzle, that velocity bleeds off. I don't know what the exact time of flight would be, but it would probably be something like 10 seconds or something ridiculous like that. So I shoot and the guy's standing right here. Well, now he's over here drinking a cup of coffee or he's tying his shoe. The odds of him still being in the same place over that long of a period of time are not very likely. Bullet drop. Again, I already talked about that with the scope, that the bullet drops and it's going to change. But what I'm not talking about with those two is, alright, so I know the bullet's got to drop, we're going to make up a number here. 56 feet to get to the target. Now, it's going to be more than that, but 56 feet. So that means I need to aim up at an angle where if I'm right here, my shot goes up 56 feet, so when it comes down, it lands on the target. So right here at ground level, the wind might be, 2-3 miles per hour, whatever. I can measure it. I can see how the grass is moving. I can feel it on my face. I can hold out a Kestrel and measure it. But it's not going to be doing the same thing 56 feet up in the air. And it's probably going to be like 300 or 400 feet that the bullet's going to drop. So 300 or 400 feet in the air, the wind could be moving in the opposite direction at 20 miles an hour. And there's no way you're going to know this until you take a shot. So in like extreme long range, what they do is they take what they call an exploratory shot. They'd shoot. Their spotter would call where the miss is. Then they'd use the grid on their scope because that's a stationary target. Adjust up and shoot again and see if they hit. And sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. When you hit at like 2,000 yards on a first round hit, it's a large percentage of luck that the wind up there is relatively similar to the wind down here. The wind is drastically different as you start climbing in the air. So even if the rifle is capable of going that far, there's going to be no shooter that can guarantee that he can put a shot that far. And that's what it's all going to come down to, is can I guarantee I'm going to make that shot that far? Like, for example, currently, I limit myself to 300 yards. If I seriously had to take a shot, and it had to count, and it had to connect, I would close the distance to 300 yards. And that's normal practice. Even Charles Halfcock, he came up on a field. Did I say his name right? I think so. Came up on a field that was like 2,000 yards long. Even though he takes that shot in practice, he's not about to make that kind of shot because he can't guarantee it's going to hit. So he crawled and closed the distance. I think it was inside of 700 yards. This way he can hit. Even though he normally can shoot that far, on paper, at practice, he's still on the close the range to guarantee that he's going to get a hit. Because that's a big deal. Now after I shoot this rifle all the time at 1,000 yards, I'm going to extend my range to like 600 because then I know. I know for a fact unless something like completely unforeseen happens, I will hit. I have better than a 90% chance at hitting at 600 yards. Like even right now, if I had to take a shot at 300, I wouldn't use this rifle. I just don't have enough trigger time on it. I would use like the Black 13 or my Scar. I mean, shit, the Black 13, what was it, last summer? I'll roll in video clips if I can find them. I was literally shooting offhand, or freehand, whatever you want to call it, making headshots at 300 yards. Like, I'm extremely confident with that rifle. I'm not confident with this rifle because I just don't have that type of trigger time yet. When I get that type of trigger time, then yes, this will ultimately become my go-to for long range, but it's not there yet. I just don't have the trigger time yet. And I will probably extend it out to probably 600 yards. And that's where I'll cut it off. Maybe 800. But I mean then, like, even as a half-inch rifle, so my bullets could go anywhere inside of 4 inches. Now you got wind variable and stuff like that, so that circle starts growing. Yeah, I could probably hit at that range if I'm extremely practiced on this rifle. But, you know, if it's a serious target, my adrenaline's going to be up. I'm going to have a lot of shit going through my head that could screw up my shot. So I'd likely close it down to 600 yards. Alright, so as I have demonstrated, making that kind of shot, even if it is possible, it's just not feasible. You would have to have a rifle set up for that particular shot, basically only. You'd set it up for that shot, you'd make that shot, and that's all that rifle would be able to do is shoot at that kind of range. Can you identify a target at that far? Do you have enough zoom on your scope to be able to identify a target? How do you know that that is a hostile target at that kind of range? Like, the scenario to be set up where a person would actually shoot at an enemy combat soldier at that type of range would just be absurd. You basically have to fly a drone down there and be like, yep, he's an enemy target, fly the drone back, or like hover it over somewhere else, when you could have just used a fucking hellfire from the drone. It makes no sense to have a rifle that is capable of shooting that far, because when would you use it? Like, try to think of a scenario in your head right now. When is a scenario where it's feasible to shoot at a target at that kind of range? One, you're going to have to be up in elevation. Two, the wind is going to blow all over, so the likelihood of you hitting that target is next to none. Three, you got to have positively identified that person as a target. Like, I mean, these are just ridiculous scenarios that would not happen. It's possible, but extremely unlikely. So now that you confirmed everything, you're going to take that shot. The odds of you hitting it at that range, like the odds of you guessing the wind up there is this, and so I apply this dope on there, and somehow I've magically shot the rifle enough at that range to where I have the dope, and for some reason I have this special base on there so I can actually aim at the target. Whether that's an adjustable base that lifts up or down, or this huge aluminum thing. So I got that special base on there, and magically somehow I made it into my final shooting position without bumping the scope and screwing up that base. My God. Like, to make that a realistic shot, it just makes no sense. Alright, so we went on to why that shot's not feasible. That just doesn't make sense to even try to make a rifle that can shoot that far. Now, it's like, again, this would have no problem shooting 1.5 miles. But I would limit the range down to 600 yards because I know I can hit. And this is a 300 PRC. This is a huge cartridge. This isn't a 308 or some 6.5 Creedmoor. This is a 300 PRC. More than capable of 1.5 miles. But again, if the target truly mattered, I would close it inside of 600. So say I did have a rifle that could shoot that far, that could potentially stretch out my target to what I would do in my head out to maybe 1,000 or 1,200 yards for a guaranteed first round hit. So that would be cool, but it's completely not feasible to think they're going to be taking down enemy snipers at 4.35 miles. That's just ridiculous. Alright. 4,921 feet per second. Let that sink in for a little bit. Alright, it's sunk in. So basically, they're talking about 900 feet per second, basically over the limitations of what a projectile is able to do. We can get close to 4,000 feet per second. There's even a couple that will go over slightly 4,000 feet per second. But they're usually like what is it, a 25-06 or something like that. Like, it's a really small projectile that is really light that doesn't have a ballistic coefficient. So when you're shooting at long range, you shoot a long aerodynamic projectile. This way you have ballistic coefficient, because yes, that 25-06 or 243 or whatever is coming out of the muzzle, you know, at like 4,000 feet per second, but it loses the velocity so incredibly quick. It loses the advantage at like 500-600 yards because it just doesn't have the ballistic coefficient of like a 300 PRC. Like, this 300 PRC overtakes like a 243 and a 25-06 at like 500 yards. So why would I want that much velocity unless I knew I was going to shoot inside of 500 yards? Now, there is a catch to this. There is a way that they could do this. The reason we're limited to that velocity is because of the twist rate, and we just rip the twisting out of the rifle, and it gets really weird, and then we have to run this really light projectile that doesn't have a ballistic coefficient. Basically, when we want to get up to those kind of velocities, we have to run a smoothbore, like out of a battle tank or something like that. Now, you could throw a slight twist on it and run something like this, which is a Sable round, but these have a whole bunch of problems. I mean, you can just ask fucking Kentucky Ballistics on what type of problems the Sable rounds have. The plastic little shields, they can break, and honestly, if they're getting that kind of velocity, I'm pretty sure that's what they did. They're running a Sable round, and somehow they found out how to accurize it or something like that. Because the problems stem, like, these little plastic cones can break, and then the Sable can go sideways and just cut out your rifling. From what I understand, I don't have a whole bunch of trigger time on Sable rounds, so from what I understand, the accuracy is all over the place. They just don't stabilize right. However, if they figure that problem out and they overcome those problems, yes, Sables would be amazing. Like, the armor penetration capabilities would be insane. You'd have an insane muzzle velocity. Pretending, you know, you figured out how to make them consistently shoot, which I don't think that's possible currently. I mean, maybe. But last I knew, that Sables just kind of shot all over the place, and you had to be relatively close range to attack armor with them. You know, maybe they solved those problems. If they did, you know, good for them. Like, that is the next logical evolution for projectiles, is to go with Sable rounds because of the velocity and everything we can get. We just weren't able to overcome the problems with a Sable round, so they never caught on because they have too many problems. But they're skinny, they're long, they're highly ballistically coefficient. A Sable round would be ideal if they mastered those problems. So it is possible for them to get 4,900 feet per second. It's possible again. Again, it's possible. It's just not very likely. They're not going to get it on this type of projectile unless they ran like this size of projectile with like a 50 caliber worth of powder charge on it. They'd have to run a Sable. It's the only way they're going to get that kind of velocity inside of a man-portable weapon system. Because if I want that velocity on, say, like this size of projectile, this would have to be like a 50 caliber action with a 50 caliber case, neck down to this, which would probably be insanely inefficient, and you get deteriorating returns, depleting returns. As you accelerate the projectile faster and faster and faster, it takes more and more energy and power to get faster and faster and faster. So at basically like a 243 combination, even though I'm running a 55 grain projectile with almost double the powder I'm getting out of a 223, I mean, they're the same weight projectile, but I'm only picking up 500 feet per second, and it's costing me double the charge. To go like 1,000 feet per second, it would probably be like 4, maybe 5 times the charge. Again, you'd have to like neck down a 50 to like a 30 cal, and you should, I'd have to play with it. But you could probably get it then, but again, you're going to have no barrel life. It's probably going to have a barrel life of a couple hundred yards. And if you're shooting at those type of ranges, it'd be nice to stick with something that has a little bit of barrel life, so you can figure out exactly how the rifle's going to perform and understand the consistency. Because once you change out the barrel, now it's basically a brand new rifle. You have to re-zero it, refigure out how far it's going to drop, because the variables are just insane. They'd have to go Sable. It's the only feasible way to hit that type of velocity consistently. Because again, like, the returns, diminishing returns. The returns you get when you're trying to accelerate a projectile that far are bad. They are really, that fast, are really, really bad. You're putting more and more and more and more powder behind it and picking up like 50 feet per second, 100 feet per second. To get 4,000, basically 5,000 feet per second, you would need just this insane amount of powder behind a very light projectile, and you would have no barrel life. Your rifle would be big and bulky and not feasible to be a man-portable system. It's just not... Again, it's possible, but it just doesn't make any sense. The only way it would make sense to go after that velocity is a sable round. But they would have to overcome the problems with this, which, again, is possible. I just don't think it's very likely. Maybe they did. So it's possibly running a sable round. That would make sense for that velocity. Otherwise, it just doesn't make sense. You're not going to take your standard bullet and accelerate it that fast without having something that's completely not practical. But anyways, I'll do a follow-up on this video because I'm sure people will give me a bunch of links of things I need to check out. I'll get all that information together, and then we'll do a follow-up video. But the answer is, yes, it is a fact. The DXL5 is a shit ton of Russian propaganda. These things are all possible, but not in a system that would be ideal for military use as a sniper rifle. Yes, it's possible to make this long a shot. It can happen. Again, this is all. The rifle's basically a propaganda machine. That's what it comes down to. That's the whole point of this video. That's what I want you to understand. We got a lot of propaganda going on here. But anyway, appreciate you checking out my video. Like to help support the channel, I have my Patreon right there. I also have affiliate links in the description down below. Just by clicking on those links, even if you don't purchase what that particular link is for, just clicking on that. Then doing the Amazon shopping you were already going to do anyway. I had a little kickback for it because you came there off my channel. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe.